Hello and welcome, members of the Wandaverse. I'm Hannah, and you're listening to episode 4 of Into the Wandaverse, your number one source for all things Scarlet Witch and friends. Howdy! If you're new to my little hex, I'm Hannah, and I'm a collector of all things Wanda Maximoff. Yes, that includes comic, MCU, animated, and really anything related to the Queen of Chaos. I've been posting on TikTok and Instagram for about a year and a half now about Scarlet Witch news, history, and merch. But the app formerly known as Musical.ly doesn't always allow me to quite deep dive as far as I'd like into all things Scarlet Witch. So here I am, sitting on the floor, ready to yap about everyone's favourite little witch. I want to start out today with a thank you to all of you who've tuned into the podcast so far. Before I even put out episode 3, you guys had gotten our very first episode to over 100 downloads. This podcast is such a passion project for me, and the fact that you guys are tuning in and giving so much positive feedback means so much to me. I'd also like to say a big thank you to Nick for being such a good sport and coming on the podcast last time. It was wonderful to have a guest, and you guys have been so sweet to him. This week, we're stepping back from the TV into the pages of comic books to discuss Wanda and Pietro's brief time away from the Avengers and, of course, their triumphant return. But before we get into that, it's time to do Wanda Song of the Week. This week, I've chosen Sun Bleached Flies by Ethel Cain. As a huge Ethel Cain fan, I was always going to try and shoehorn one of her songs in, and this one to me just really screams Wanda at her lowest, but also her most magnificent. In personal news, that's not really all Wanda related at all, I am now in my new flat. Hooray! Which means we can return to our usual collecting schedule. This time with more shelves and a flatmate apparently willing to let me put Wanda in the living room. Hooray! Sorry for the break in between episodes again. The summer holidays have really been throwing a little bit of a spanner in the works, but we should be able to get back on a regular schedule now. So where even to begin with news? Since I last spoke to you all, we've had both Comic-Con and D23, plus a variety of other announcements. Having watched 3 trailers for Agatha now and viewed the aesthetic, I've got to say that I really could not be more excited for this show. We're definitely returning to Westview, and it looks like we're going to have an amazing time traveling through the eras again. This time, rather than sitcoms, we're headed through horror eras and witch stereotypes. I think this show is going to be absolutely perfect for the Halloween season, and honestly has the chance to be just as much fun as WandaVision. The insane theories have already begun, and I can't wait to be totally delulu with all of you. The week before release, I'll be doing a special episode of the podcast giving a full Agatha Harkness history lesson, as well as when the show is releasing, I'll be doing a recap and review each week, as well as the regular contents of the podcast. If you have any suggestions for what you'd like me to cover on these episodes, please feel free to let me know. The other announcements that came out of D23 are that Wanda will appear in the 3rd and final season of What If. It's such a shame that this show has been somewhat of a failure to launch. I feel like if this was done right, it could have been a real staple for Marvel. But I feel like the what-if questions they answered on the show weren't the ones that everyone was necessarily asking. They failed to have any truly memorable episodes like what if the other half were snapped, or what if Thanos had been stopped on Titan, questions that are hotly debated in the fandom. Instead, they've been focused very much on abstract questions that have lacked the kind of wide appeal that might have drawn a larger audience. I hope that Marvel might give this show another chance in the future, and maybe be less concerned about getting the original actors if that's what's costing too much and causing them to use them littler and littler. But for now, What If will end with season 3, and with White Vision and Agatha also set to return. I have to wonder if maybe we're getting that What If Wanda Grew Up on Musicals that was scrapped from season 2. While the release date for Marvel Zombies wasn't confirmed, we did hear that it will consist of 4 episodes and carry a mature rating, so we're getting into the blood and guts of the issue. Since Wanda is the main villain of the series, I think we can expect to see her a lot in the show. I'm personally hoping for a flashback of how she became zombified, because I'll take any pre-Undead Wanda content. We've been told that all of the announced animation projects will be released by the end of 2025, so I'd expect we'll get a release date relatively soon. In the final piece of animation news, we learned that both Season 2 and Season 3 of X-Men 97 are already in the works. And it's been confirmed that Polaris, aka Lorna Dane, will appear in the show. With the cliffhanger that showed her, Pietro, and Wanda all in the boat that grabbed Magneto, I can imagine that we can count on appearances from all 3 of Magneto's children. I've got to say, I've been waiting for X-Men 97 to resolve the twin storyline for a very long time now, so I absolutely cannot wait to find out what's going to happen next. In the final piece of animation news, we learned that both Season 2 and Season 3 of X-Men 97 are already in the works, and it was confirmed that Polaris, aka Lorna Dane, will appear in the show. With the cliffhanger that showed her, Wanda, and Pietro all in the boat that grabbed Magneto, I can imagine that we can count on appearances from all three of Magneto's children. I've got to say, I've been waiting on X-Men 97 to resolve the twin storyline for a very long time now, so I absolutely cannot wait to find out what's going to happen next. It seems that the Scarlet Witch will be a main feature at Halloween this year, as she's been seen wandering around Avengers Campus, as well as a new Scarlet Witch collection having popped up on the Disney Store website. It seems like Marvel is finally ready to start capitalizing on Wanda's appeal, and I couldn't be happier about it. We've got the demand, and only they can give us the goods, and give us the goods they must. Now, on to the main event. Wanda and Pietro returning to the Avengers. We left off having spoken about the twins hopping back to Wundagore Mountain to regain their powers. I suspect that this random loss of their powers only came about because Janet and Hank returned to the team. This is the 60s. We can't have more than one little lady being super at the same time. What's interesting is that the twins are drawn on the cover of comics they don't actually appear on. Wanda is present on the cover of issue 33, despite not appearing at all. I'd imagine this means that the covers were drawn before the storylines were pinned down, mostly because this isn't the only instance of this happening. Wanda makes her first appearance back with the Avengers in issue 36, and it's time to get very excited, people, because it's the debut of the tiara. The wimple is out, and the tiara is here to slay. This outfit is the one that we're with for a very long time. Tiara, swimsuit, short boots, and short, curly, dark hair. It's an iconic look for the ages. Wanda makes a grand reappearance at Avengers HQ to announce to Cap that while her and Pietro have regained their powers, Pietro has been kidnapped by a UFO. You know, it's the small things that can be so tragic. The current Avengers lineup, in their absence, is Captain America, Hawkeye, Wasp, Giant Man, and Hawkeye, who is asking for the lovely Natasha Romanoff to join the fray. What's funny is that him and Hank are beefing because Hank says that Nat can't join the Avengers because the Avengers isn't a halfway house for former criminals, despite the fact that the Kooky Quartet was almost entirely made up of former criminals, which Hank has suddenly decided is a problem because even though he was perfectly friendly with Wanda and Pietro before, I honestly assume it's a Clint problem. Basically, everybody at this has beef with Clint. Also, 60s Hank is the worst, so hypocrisy is to be expected. Wanda and Jan are like, guys, can we stop fighting and go save my brother from the town of UFOs, please? So the Avengers and Black Widow all rock off to go and do some good old-fashioned saving. The Avengers arrive in Transia, where the twins were born, and Wanda announces that she can feel the presence of some sort of force field, surprising Captain America, who is like, I didn't know she knew how to do that. Wanda is like, silly me, it must have happened while I was regaining my powers. A top moment of comedy comes next when Steve tries to take down a force field by, you guessed it, just hammering away at it with his shield, which is a good and logical use of his time and strength. Hawkeye then tries to blast it with an arrow, because as we all know, force fields are very sensitive to wood. This genius plan does not succeed, but don't you fear, Wanda is like, wait, when me and Pietro were but young children, we used to sneak into the caves that she thinks go directly under the village. So like the Scooby Gang they are, the Avengers hop into the caves and they can see the light of a massive flying saucer. They find the control panel. The controls are revealed to be a massive power-hungry computer named ghoulaxyart, who is draining information from the bloke who welcomed the twins back into the village as an apology for chasing them out years before. ghoulaxyart reveals that he lured the Avengers to him in order to extract power from them so that he can build Ultroids. The Avengers notice that Wanda and Pietro are already in tanks. Shock horror! Wanda is not Wanda, but Fonda. She is in fact an Ultroid known as Ultriana. Ultriana and the Ultroids attack the Avengers, capturing them all. They are to be subjected to ghoulaxyart's experiments. Since the Black Widow is not an Avenger, she is sent to be destroyed. We pick up from this cliffhanger immediately in issue 37, and it is in this issue that we get to see Wanda and Pietro again, and they officially rejoin the team. Hurrah! However, the beginning of this issue, it's all doom and gloom until Hank turns into Goliath, aka Big Ant-Man, and manages to smash his way out of the holding tube to free the others. If you're expecting that this issue would be filled with a lot of crashing and bashing, then you'd be wrong. It actually sort of centers around a moral question. In order for the Avengers to be able to defeat ghoulaxyart, they would have to kill the leader of Wanda and Pietro's village, which would be killing an innocent and against the Avenger Code. This creates a real pickle for the Avengers, who are steadfast on not killing civilians. This is the 60s. Bystanders aren't allowed to get offed. Throughout this issue, Wanda also shows an increasing control of her powers, only defeated when Pietro is threatened and she just sort of gives up fighting. Yes, Wanda and Pietro are still doing this little codependent thing at this point, where if one is in danger, the other just loses all rational fighting skills. However, this issue does place Wanda as one of the biggest threats within the Avengers in terms of her powers, which is a welcome change from her being seen as one of the weaker Avengers before. If you're wondering how the Avengers' moral quarrel shakes out, and how they manage to get around it, don't worry. Once the team has all been defeated besides Black Widow and Hawkeye, Clint threatens to simply let the village elder die, and Arxar says he won't do it, but Natasha says, "Look bro, it's like you said, I'm not an Avenger, and I'll let any man die." When he doesn't believe her, she literally makes him look into his eyes and is like, "Do I look like a woman who's joking?" Iconic, to be honest. I think that this comparison between Natasha and the other characters that she's surrounded by is important. It is often Wanda that is touted as the consistently moral grey character due to her reputation post House of M and Avengers Disassembled. But it is Wanda and Janet who are the Avengers' good girls, while Nat is the consistent dark horse. If I do anything on this podcast, I want to prove that for most of her history, Wanda really doesn't deserve her villain rap. Now, you may have noticed that there are potentially 3 women on the team now, and you know what that means. At least one has got to go. But don't worry, it isn't Wanda. She's only just back. Unfortunately, it's Nat who has to get the boot. While the Avengers wait to vote on swearing her in, she's approached by S.H.I.E.L.D. and asked to be a double agent behind the Iron Curtain. To be fair, this is a shuffle of the team in general, as Captain America takes a brief leave to go and look for Bucky, and Hercules reappears. Over the next couple of issues, Wanda and Pietro play a more of a supporting role, while Hawkeye and Hercules take centre stage for the plot, with Wanda even coming down with a mysterious flu for an episode in case her powers are too useful. Between issues 38 and 42, Wanda and Pietro spend much of their time playing Peacemaker Between issues 38 and 42, Wanda and Pietro spend much of their time playing peacemakers between Hercules and Hawkeye. While Wanda is just back in the same situation as she was in her early Avenger times, Pietro literally cannot hack it and debates just throwing in the towel. What is prominent about Wanda during this period of turmoil for the rest of the Avengers is that she's a trusted member of the team, and her powers seem to go from strength to strength. While she doesn't have any real hope of a romantic connection, she forms close relationships with most of the team. She's extremely welcoming to Natasha when she becomes a member, and Hercules shows her a great deal of respect. Of course, Wanda's strongest relationship remains to be her one with Pietro. The two of them are very much a package deal during this era, and it is the strength of this particular connection that restricts Wanda from really having any other major players in her life. While she's often flirted with and seen as an object of desire, she can't really do much with anyone because Pietro is breathing down her neck. This isn't to say that I don't love the twins being close. I think that in the modern era we've actually gone too far in the opposite direction, and we're only just course correcting now with the newest run. But it is somewhat frustrating that both twins struggle to have storylines separate from each other during this period. For example, their first major plotline since their return to the Avengers comes in issue 47, when Magneto and Toad escape the captivity they've been stuck in, and upon becoming free, Magneto is determined to re-recruit the twins to the Brotherhood. What's funny is he doesn't care at all about getting Mastermind back, even though he actually wanted to be a member and the twins never did. Magneto calls Wanda beauteous, which is gross considering the connection established with them later, but it hadn't been written yet, so we can't really blame the writers for the Targaryen-type talk. In this issue, we once again get to look at the event that caused the twins to join the Brotherhood in the first place, e.g. trauma. Magneto gets a little flashback for when he was wandering around looking for other mutants, and found the villagers trying to murder Wanda for being a witch because she accidentally set a barn on fire. In this version of the flashback, we see that Pietro very bravely defends Wanda when she can run no further from the villagers and is attacked by all sorts of metal tools. And who can control metal but Magneto? He removes the villagers' weapons and then declares himself to be the twins' savior. But in typical villain fashion, a thank you isn't going to be enough. It's a lifetime of servitude for the twins. After his little exposition fest, Magneto says he's going to contact the twins via radio wave. I'm sure they'll be super thrilled. He sends them a coded message and they rock up to a castle he's commandeered and fall into his trap. In the next issue, Magneto has them tied up and says he'll force them to rejoin the Brotherhood, to which they both reject, with Wanda declaring, "Whatever you may do, we'll remain Avengers to the end." Magneto gets pressed that the twins keep mentioning the Avengers and tells them to cut it out or that he won't be their friend anymore, and the twins were like, "Bro, we were never friends, you traumatized us." So Magneto decides that threats aren't going to work and goes for a display of strength. Men will do anything but apologize. While he's doing all this grandstanding, Pietro manages to get a distress call to the Avengers, but doesn't dare attempt to attack on his own, probably because, as he previously said, Magneto is just too evil. The entire time, Toad keeps telling Magneto to just kill the twins, but Eric doesn't want to, because he probably just doesn't want to be stuck with Toad, so of course he tells Froggy to shut up. Magneto is determined to make the twins join because he wants the team to have some kind of swag, and Quicksilver is worried that the Avengers haven't yet showed up, and decides to pretend to join Magneto in order for them to escape. He goes with Magneto to the UN to speak on behalf of mutant kind, and then they demand that mutants be given a nation of their own. This will be a plot point later. The Avengers then attack, and the humans at the UN also begin to fight against Magneto. Then a bullet grazes Wanda's temple, which I imagine means it hit her in the tiara and she passes out. Magneto tells Pietro that it was the humans that did this to his sister, and they can never truly be safe from humans, and thus Quicksilver turns against the Avengers and joins Magneto for real. Wanda is unfortunately reduced to a passive role in this entire saga, chained up and left out of Quicksilver's plan while captured by Magneto, and then once again the damsel in distress once she is shot by the bullet. The bullet for some reason apparently causes memory loss, as a means for why the steadfast Avenger Wanda would ever want to leave with her brother and Magneto. This passivity is somewhat necessary for this plotline to ever happen, since Wanda so strongly communicates that she will never ever abandon her promise as an Avenger. But it's a shame that despite her strong words, she once again finds herself injured and out of the action. As we've discussed before, this approach was commonplace in the 60s comics, and other powerful women like Jean Grey and Sue Storm were also just kind of fainting all over the shop. Wanda and Pietro's storyline continues over in their comic of origin, the X-Men, where good old Professor X has apparently died, with the comic opening with Quicksilver having snuck away from Daddy Dearest to attend the funeral. Unfortunately for Pietro, he is spotted by the X-Men because apparently just lingering around in graveyards wearing a trench coat is actually pretty conspicuous. Pietro's commitment to being evil is already wearing off, probably because its pretense for beginning is pretty woolly. He wonders if maybe he came to the funeral because he is lonely and misses the Avengers. No, buddy, you came because the plot said you should. The X-Men try to speak to him, but Quicksilver just pegs it. He comes home unaware that Magneto is mad as pies that he went out, and has a brief argument with Toad, as one does, and lets us know via exposition that Wanda is up and knocking about, but that her powers are still gone and she's still confused. He muses that perhaps the Avengers could be of use, which duh, and then bursts into tears in Wanda's lap because Professor X is dead and Pietro had hoped that he could help Wanda. Wanda is bemused by her brother's tears, but comforts him all the same. It's interesting to note that the comics refers to the twins once again as youths. They're supposed to be teenagers, same as the X-Men. This makes their terrible decision-making a little more excusable, I guess. The pity party is interrupted by Magneto storming in to yell at Quicksilver for leaving the island. The ever-loyal companion Toad encourages Magneto's rage, only for Magneto to lift him into the air in fury, revealing that he literally makes Toad wear a metal belt so that he can punish him by throwing him around. Magneto would definitely not pass any kind of HR investigation. Also, you gotta feel for Toad. He's been so loyal to this dude, and every time he tries to support his madness, he only gets abused for it. Magneto rages against Pietro for heading out, and as she's going to do for the next few episodes, Wanda just kind of stands around being confused. You really can't argue that Wanda went back into the dark side on this particular outing of having rejoined the Brotherhood, because she literally doesn't do anything. The X-Men get captured and the Avengers show up, and all the while our girlie is just confused. Genuinely, a battle happens and Wanda is just standing girl emoji the whole time. Literally, I'm talking about 4 comics, including the first ever Avengers vs X-Men fight, and despite being at the centre of the whole thing, Wanda just sort of follows Pietro around. It's truly baffling that Toad manages to have a redemption arc and help the twins escape, and they'd rather hop in a boat with him than ask their close friends for help with Wanda's condition. This becomes, for plot reasons, even more mystifying when in a few issues they end up doing just that. But I guess you kind of just have to accept that it's comic book logic, and the twins weren't wanted back on the Avengers right now due to the heavy plot going on with new member Vision. I'd sum up this adventure for Quicksilver as just pure madness, and Wanda as having a complete lack of agency, which unfortunately defines their early adventures. Thus, we end the 60s with Wanda and Pietro no longer Avengers, and still not having made up with their Avengers friends. Wanda, whilst apparently somewhat having regained her memories, still hasn't managed to regain her hex powers. While this makes little sense, her continued lack of powers actually leads to the beginning of her journey into witchcraft, and also her first small moment of real romance. We'll discuss all that on the next episode of the podcast, as well as any news updates, including, I hope, a full breakdown of the upcoming Shop Disney Scarlet Witch collection. If you can't wait to continue your journey into the Wandaverse, then you can find videos from me almost every day over on TikTok at Into the Wandaverse, or over on Instagram at The Wandaverse. Thank you so much for my producer and editor, Nicholas Chandler. Podcast art by ghoulaxyart, music by Melody Reyes Griffiths. I'll see you all very soon, and until then, stay magical. And I'll see you all very soon. No, that's not it. Okay, let's do it again. And rolling.